Coming into 2022, we were expecting fairly flat defence expenditure in Europe because of the economic difficulties that countries were facing following the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on government finances. So ultimately, the budgets that were released for 2022 by governments in Europe didn't show an awful lot of growth. But then we saw a step change following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Several countries, around 20, announced budget uplifts to varying degrees. The most significant of these, Germany, announcing that €100 billion fund for defence, but also to try and increase defence spending towards 2% of GDP from the 1.1, 1.2 that they currently spend. We also saw countries in the east of Europe start to implement increases. Theirs were more immediate, shifting defence spending from 2 to 2.5% of GDP in most of the Baltics. In Western Europe, I think the increases were a bit perhaps slower. They're coming in more into 2023 than in 2022, which is fair because obviously it takes a while for countries to implement such increases. The UK announced that it would increase defence spending to 3% of GDP, and that's obviously not the case anymore. But with the integrated review coming up, we may see some increased spending for defence in the UK. But ultimately, the defence settlement for UK's defence budget was announced a few years ago. We're still at the end of that period. So whether those increases can actually come through at such times of incredible economic difficulties. We've got high inflation, supply chain issues, and weakening currencies against the dollar. So despite all these increases coming in, we're starting to see those economic challenges start to erode spending. Primarily, yes, because these countries, as I say, we're facing these acute economic difficulties even coming into 2022, and those have sharpened. So what we're seeing is this balancing act. It's one of the key themes that came through in 2022. You have these strategic drivers pushing defence spending upwards. Those not just Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but also heightened geopolitical tension that we've seen in East Asia over the course of the year. But that then has this counterweight of these economic difficulties, of these public financing challenges, of inflation, eroding any increases that you make. So when that all comes together, these countries are really in quite a difficult position in order to try and find the correct level of spending that they're going to be able to maintain these capabilities to actually bring forward the plans that they had, while also maintaining other aspects of public spending that are becoming as important as inflation creates challenges for social spending, healthcare, education. It bites everywhere. So it creates pressure outside of defence budgets from the public spending perspective, but also within the defence budget on each aspect of spending. So personnel, capabilities, operations, everything becomes more expensive. So it's a really difficult time.